The late October sun beat down on the fields of Fairhaven, Missouri, but it offered little comfort to Noah Bennett. His boots crunched over brittle earth as he surveyed the rows of wilting crops. Another year, another fight he was losing. The once thriving Bennett farm, passed down through 5 generations, had become a battlefield against debt, drought, and the ruthless expectations of the modern agricultural economy. Noah wiped the sweat from his brow with a sleeve already stained from a day's labor and stared out across the golden fields, now tinged with the gray pallor of dying hope. Down the dirt road, the Fairhaven Harvest Festival was already underway. Noah could hear the distant laughter of children, the hum of engines from old tractors polished for the annual parade, and the twang of a country band warming up. It was the one day a year when the whole town forgot their worries. At least, they tried to. Noah hesitated by the battered old pickup, the same one he'd driven since before Emily was born. He could see his reflection in the dusty window, a man weathered by life, salt and pepper hair curling at the edges of his cap, lines etched deep around his gray eyes. Once, he'd been called the future of farming, with his ideas about organic rotations and sustainable methods. Now, folks whispered behind his back at the diner, "Bennett's dreaming too big for a man so broke." He climbed into the truck and headed toward town, the rickety engine coughing and spitting as if protesting the journey. As he pulled into the gravel lot near the community center, he caught sight of familiar faces. Hank Morrison, tall and barrel-chested, stood surrounded by a knot of men, laughing heartily. "There he is," Hank called loudly, elbowing one of his buddies. "Bennett the idealist. How's that miracle harvest of yours holding up?" Laughter rippled through the group. Noah forced a polite smile and tipped his cap. "Same as ever, Hank," he said evenly, working hard and hoping for the best. He moved past them without waiting for a reply, shoulders squared against the sting of their mockery. He found Emily near the refreshment stand, chatting animatedly with Mrs. Cruz, the warm-hearted woman who ran the local church. "Dad," Emily waved him over, her green eyes bright beneath her ball cap. She wore jeans tucked into scuffed boots and a hoodie bearing the name of her soon-to-be university, University of Missouri, Environmental Sciences Department. "Mrs. Cruz was just telling me about the shelter in Westbrook," Emily said, practically buzzing with energy. "They're desperate for fresh produce." "The shelter for heroes?" Noah asked, genuinely curious. "Yes," Mrs. Cruz said, her eyes warm with concern. "Federal funding cuts have hit them hard. They're barely scraping by." Noah nodded thoughtfully but said nothing. His mind was too cluttered with worries about overdue loans, Emily's tuition bills, and the dwindling supplies in his pantry. Later that night, after the festival had wound down and the cool autumn air crept through the cracks of the old farmhouse, Noah sat by the kitchen window. He nursed a cup of black coffee gone cold, staring out into the darkness that cloaked his fields. Emily entered quietly, wrapping a worn flannel blanket around her shoulders. "Dad," she said gently, sitting across from him, "I have an idea." He raised an eyebrow. "Let's give it away," she said simply. "All of it." Noah stared at her, not sure he heard correctly. "Give what away?" "The harvest. Everything we can salvage. Let's donate it to the shelter for heroes." He leaned back, rubbing a hand over his jaw. That's crazy. We can't even cover our costs." "Dad, most of it is just sitting there. The distributors rejected it because it's ugly. It'll rot before it sells. We're not saving anything by hoarding it." Noah chuckled humorlessly. "You think Goodwill's gonna pay the mortgage?" "No," she said quietly. "But maybe it pays something more important." He looked at her, really looked at her. There was Maria's spark in Emily's eyes, that fierce belief that the right thing was always worth doing, no matter the cost. "You sound just like your mother," he said softly. Emily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Maybe it's time we stopped measuring success in dollars and bushels. Maybe it's about the people we help." Noah sat there long after Emily had gone to bed, his coffee stone cold and untouched. He watched the stars fade behind the slow creep of dawn. And somewhere deep inside, a decision settled into place, quiet but unshakable. He grabbed the old landline phone from its cradle and dialed the number listed on the flyer Mrs. Cruz had given them, the Shelter for Heroes. When a sleepy voice answered, Noah cleared his throat and said, "Hi, this is Noah Bennett. I've got a harvest, about 50 acres worth, and if you folks can use it, it's yours." There was a long pause on the other end, then a choked-up reply, "God bless you, Mr. Bennett." Noah hung up and looked out the window again. The fields, bathed in the soft pink of the new morning, didn't look so broken now. They looked like hope. He had no idea that this single, foolish act of generosity would change everything. For him, for Emily, for Fairhaven, and even for the country. The morning after Noah and Emily made their decision, the sun rose over Fairhaven in a haze of uncertainty and quiet hope. Noah sat at the worn kitchen table, the old rotary phone in his hand, its cord stretched taut to the wall. Emily hovered nearby, nursing a mug of coffee she hadn't touched, her nerves practically humming in the small farmhouse kitchen. Noah dialed the number he'd found online for Shelter for Heroes, a non-profit based about 30 miles away in Riverside. As the line rang, he stared out the window at his fields, rows of vegetables still standing proud despite the drought-scorched earth around them. So much food, so much work, all set to rot without a buyer. "Shelter for Heroes, this is Marcy speaking," a cheerful voice answered. Noah cleared his throat. Good morning. My name's Noah Bennett. I have a small farm out in Fairhaven. I've got, well, a lot of produce that's good to eat, but rejected by distributors for, cosmetic reasons. I heard y'all support veterans and, well, I was wondering if you could use some fresh food." There was a pause, then an audible gasp. "Mr. Bennett, we would be honored. Fresh produce is like gold to us. We've been relying mostly on canned goods lately." Her voice brimmed with genuine gratitude. "How much are we talking about?" Noah scratched his head, glancing at Emily, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. "About 50 acres worth." The line went silent. 50 acres, Marcy repeated, stunned. "That's right, and it's free. You just have to come and get it." Another beat of stunned silence. Then Marcy's voice returned, thick with emotion. "Mr. Bennett, I don't even know what to say. I'll start making calls right now. We'll find volunteers. We'll make this happen." "Thank you. Thank you so much." When Noah hung up, Emily let out a whoop that startled the cat off the windowsill. "You did it, Dad," she cheered. "Now we just have to figure out how to pick 50 acres of produce without any workers." Noah chuckled dryly. "One step at a time, kiddo." By noon, word had spread through the town faster than Noah could have imagined. It started with Elena Cruz, the energetic and beloved pastor of Fairhaven Community Church. Upon hearing Noah's plan, she fired off a flurry of group texts, phone calls, and social media posts. "Calling all good-hearted folks," one of her messages read. "Fairhaven's own Noah Bennett is donating his entire harvest to Shelter for Heroes. Volunteers needed ASAP for emergency harvest. Bring gloves, hats, and a heart ready to serve." The response was immediate and overwhelming. First came the church members, retired couples, Sunday school teachers, teenagers eager for community service hours. Then came the local businesses. The diner closed early, the hardware store loaned out tools and crates. Even the town librarian showed up with a sun hat and garden shears. Noah stood at the edge of his fields that afternoon, mouth agape, as vehicle after vehicle rumbled down his long gravel driveway. Pickup trucks, minivans, old sedans packed with families. The entire community seemed to be pouring onto his land. "Pastor Cruz," he called as Elena hopped down from her pickup, her silver hair tucked under a ball cap. She grinned broadly. "You didn't think you were going to do this alone, did you, Noah?" Fairhaven takes care of its own, and its heroes. Before he could respond, she clapped him on the back and strode off, organizing volunteers with the efficiency of a battlefield general. Emily joined him, her eyes wide with wonder. "Dad, look at this." Rows of people fanned out across the fields, laughter and chatter rising into the warm air. Kids pulled carrots from the earth with delighted squeals. Elderly men and women, bent with age but steady of hand, moved methodically down the rows of squash and beans. Within hours, crates filled with produce lined the driveway, ready for transport. Someone set up a portable grill and started cooking hot dogs for the workers. A local musician showed up with a guitar, strumming cheerful tunes from the bed of his truck. It wasn't just a harvest, it was a celebration. As the sun dipped low, painting the fields in molten gold, Emily perched on the hood of their old Ford pickup, phone in hand. "Smile, Dad," she called, lifting the camera. Noah gave a sheepish grin as Emily panned her phone across the scene, the bustling fields, the volunteers laughing and working, the crates piled high with food destined for heroes. She posted the short video clip to her social media with a simple caption, "When a small-town farmer decides to give it all away. Fairhaven coming together to feed our veterans. Shicha searching harvest for heroes. Shicha just real American spirit." Within minutes, the post began to gather likes and shares. By the time Noah and Emily sat down for a late supper of sandwiches and lemonade on the front porch, the video had gone viral. Local news stations picked it up first, then regional outlets. Before midnight, major national networks were reaching out for interviews. Emily scrolled through the comments, her face alight with disbelief. "Dad, look at this. People from all over the country are commenting. They're calling you a hero." Noah shook his head, humbled and bewildered. "I'm no hero. I'm just trying to do the right thing." Still, as he watched the glow of the screens illuminate Emily's face, watched the field lights still flickering from the day's labor, he realized something powerful was happening, something far bigger than he could have ever planned. Out there in the cool Missouri night, amid the dusty trucks and tired laughter, a seed had been planted, and it was growing faster than anything he'd ever seen. The night air hung heavy with the smell of cut hay and damp earth as Noah sat on the porch, a steaming mug of coffee warming his calloused hands. Out beyond the darkened fields, the stars blinked sharp against the velvet black sky. Normally, this hour of the night would have been peaceful, just the chirr of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl breaking the quiet. Tonight, though, something felt off. Noah shifted in his chair, the old wood creaking under him. A low rumble, barely audible at first, stirred the hair on the back of his neck. He set the mug down carefully and stood, peering into the distance. Twin beams of headlights pierced the darkness, growing steadily larger. Then another set, and another. "That's odd," he muttered to himself. Down the dirt road leading to the Bennett farm, a convoy of sleek black SUVs was pulling up, kicking up clouds of dust in their wake. They moved with a kind of fluid coordination that immediately struck Noah as official. He glanced back toward the house, where Emily's light still glowed behind her window. He didn't want to alarm her. Maybe it was just someone from Shelter for Heroes coming to say thank you. Maybe some local government folks, stirred by the viral video, wanted a look at the farm. Still, a knot tightened in his gut. The first SUV came to a halt just beyond the front yard. The engine purred quietly before shutting off. Doors opened in unison, and 3 men in suits stepped out. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut and an expression like carved granite, broke from the group and approached the porch. "Mr. Bennett?" he asked, his voice low but clear. Noah nodded, squinting slightly. "That's me." The man pulled out a wallet and flashed a badge so quickly, Noah barely caught a glimpse. "Agent Lucas Perry. I'm with the United States Secret Service." Noah's heart stumbled in his chest. "Secret Service?" he echoed, disbelief thick in his voice. "Sir, there's been..." Perry hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Interest. High-level interest in your recent actions. We are here to assess the security of this property." Noah blinked. "Security? For what?" He laughed a little, a strained, confused sound. "Look, Agent, I donated some food to a shelter. I'm just a farmer." Perry's mouth twitched, the barest hint of a smile that never reached his eyes. "Sometimes, Mr. Bennett, small actions make big waves." Before Noah could respond, Emily came to the front door, a worried look on her face. She pulled on her sweater as she hurried down the steps. "Dad, what's going on?" she whispered, eyeing the black vehicles lined up beyond the yard. "Stay inside, Em," Noah said automatically. Then, softer, to Perry, "Is this about the VA? Are they sending someone to inspect or..." "Sir," Perry interrupted gently, "I'm not at liberty to disclose all the details right now. What I can tell you is that your actions caught the attention of someone very senior. We need to ensure this location is secure. pending further developments. More headlights appeared on the horizon. Noah counted at least 5 additional SUVs, some larger than the ones already here. Emily clutched his sleeve. "Dad, look." At the edges of the fields, shadowy figures moved, people in dark clothing, earpieces in place, scanning the perimeter with flashlights and handheld devices. Noah felt a strange mixture of fear and awe. "Sir," Perry said, "we need your permission to conduct a full-site survey tonight. It's essential." "You want to sweep the farm?" Noah asked, still trying to process the surreal situation. Perry gave a crisp nod. Standard protocol when certain individuals might be considering a visit. Emily's eyes widened. "A visit? From who?" "Can't say yet, miss," Perry replied politely, "but you'll want to be ready." Noah hesitated. His farm was old, messy, and frankly, embarrassing. He hadn't had time to fix the broken fence by the south pasture or paint over the peeling trim on the barn. It was a working farm, not some manicured estate. "This is crazy," he muttered. "It's necessary," Perry said. After a long moment, Noah nodded. "Fine. Do what you have to do." Perry signaled with a subtle hand motion. Immediately, a small army of agents moved in, fanning out across the property. Emily watched them in stunned silence. "Dad," she whispered, this is not normal." Noah squeezed her shoulder. "No, sweetheart, it sure isn't." From the porch, they watched the scene unfold like something from a movie. Men and women in suits, checking sheds, barns, the perimeter fence. They used flashlights with red filters that cast eerie glows across the cornfields. In the distance, Noah saw a pair of agents crouched near the old irrigation ditch, examining it as if it might harbor some hidden threat. Another group methodically cleared the apple orchard, shining their beams among the gnarled branches. "Dad, look!" Emily tugged at his sleeve. He followed her gaze. 2 agents were pacing out distances across the front yard, speaking into radios. Another agent was inspecting the dirt road leading up to the house, marking points with small discreet flags. Emily bit her lip. "They're planning an arrival, a big one." Noah nodded grimly. He might be just a farmer, but even he could recognize the signs now. This wasn't a casual visit from a government rep. This was preparation for someone important, really important. Inside the house, Noah's phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. He hurried in and picked it up. An unfamiliar number with a Washington, D.C. area code. He hesitated, then answered. "Noah Bennett." "Mr. Bennett," said a crisp, professional voice. "This is Captain Sarah Whitmore with the United States Army. I'm overseeing special logistics for an upcoming visit to your property. May I have a few moments of your time?" Noah sank into a kitchen chair, feeling the floor tilt slightly under him. "Sure," he managed. Whitmore continued, "I'll be arriving on site first thing tomorrow morning to coordinate. In the meantime, please know you have done a remarkable thing. Your donation has touched lives far beyond Fairhaven." "Captain," Noah said carefully, "who exactly is coming here?" There was a pause. "I'm not authorized to confirm just yet, but I suggest you get some rest tonight. Tomorrow is going to be eventful." Noah hung up and stared blankly at the wall. Emily hovered in the doorway. "Dad?" He shook his head slowly, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Sweetheart," he said, voice low with wonder and a hint of fear, "I think we just got ourselves into something a whole lot bigger than a donation." Outside, under the cold stars of Fairhaven, the black SUVs remained like silent sentinels, engines idling, headlights casting long shadows across the farm fields, the first lights heralding a day that would change everything. The morning after the mysterious SUVs had disappeared down the long dirt road, Noah Bennett woke early, even by farmer standards. The autumn sun hadn't yet crested the line of hickory trees that bordered the eastern side of the Bennett farm. His coffee steamed in the crisp morning air as he stood on the porch, one hand braced against the wooden column, his mind still replaying the strange events of the previous evening. Across the fields, dew sparkled on the withering cornstalks. Emily sat on the porch steps, legs pulled to her chest, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She had barely slept, and neither had he. Any chance it was just some government suits looking to buy pumpkins for Halloween? Emily asked, her voice light but her eyes searching. Noah chuckled dryly. If that was their plan, they sure brought a lot of security for it. Before either of them could speculate further, the crunch of tires on gravel pulled their attention to the driveway. Another black SUV, sleek, spotless, and unmistakably federal. It pulled to a gentle stop near the barn. Out stepped a woman in uniform, her posture straight, her bearing unmistakable. She was tall, with sandy blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun, wearing a sharp dress uniform that gleamed with polished buttons and crisp creases. Her face was serious, but not unkind. She carried herself with a kind of controlled energy, like someone used to giving orders and having them followed. Noah set his coffee down on the porch railing, exchanged a glance with Emily, and made his way down the steps. The woman approached, offering a firm handshake. Mr. Bennett, I'm Captain Sarah Whitmore, U.S. Army. May I have a moment of your time? Noah hesitated only briefly before taking her hand. Her grip was strong but not aggressive, the kind of handshake that spoke of respect. Of course, Captain, Noah said, glancing toward Emily, who stayed perched on the steps, alert and watchful. Captain Whitmore smiled slightly, perhaps recognizing the tension. Mind if we talk somewhere private? Noah gestured toward the picnic table under the big oak tree near the barn. Right this way. Once seated, Whitmore wasted no time getting to the point. Mr. Bennett, your recent donation to Shelter for Heroes has garnered significant attention. Noah shifted uncomfortably. Didn't do it for attention. I believe you, she said sincerely, which is precisely why it has resonated. She pulled a small leather notebook from her pocket and flipped it open. I'm here to conduct a preliminary site assessment. Standard protocol. Assessment for what, exactly? Noah asked, his suspicion rising. Captain Whitmore met his gaze squarely. A very important individual, a senior government official, has expressed interest in visiting your farm personally. They want to see firsthand what's happening here. Noah blinked, trying to process. Why? It's just a few fields and a lot of tired volunteers. You've done something rare, she said, something that cuts through the noise. In a time when so much feels divided, you showed what real service looks like, without asking for anything in return. Noah rubbed a hand across his face. Look, Captain, I'm not looking to be anyone's poster boy. I'm not interested in politics or photo ops. Whitmore leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping into something lower, almost conspiratorial. Neither is this official, not in the way you're thinking. But with your permission, we'd like to do a security walkthrough, quietly, discreetly. If the visit moves forward, it will be handled respectfully, focused on the story, not the spectacle. Noah looked past her, across the fields that had been his family's for 5 generations. The idea of men in suits crawling all over his land made his skin crawl, but something in Captain Whitmore's manner, direct, no nonsense, convinced him this wasn't about exploitation. Still, he had conditions. I'll agree to the walkthrough, he said slowly. But if this happens, it stays about the veterans, not me, not some politician's agenda. Whitmore smiled genuinely for the first time. Understood. In fact, I was hoping you'd say that. She pulled a folder from her briefcase and slid it across the table. This outlines the basic procedures, advanced teams, communications protocols. You won't have to host any media unless you agree to it, and you'll have veto power over all photo ops on your property. Noah thumbed through the folder briefly. It was thorough, clinical, and oddly reassuring. I'll need a day or two to get everything in place, Whitmore continued. If you consent, the visit could happen as soon as tomorrow afternoon. That fast? Noah asked, startled. These kinds of things move quickly, she said, rising smoothly to her feet. Once the ball starts rolling, it doesn't stop. Noah stood, too, feeling the full weight of what he was agreeing to settle on his shoulders. He looked toward Emily again, who was watching intently from the porch. Her nod was almost imperceptible, but carried volumes. He turned back to Captain Whitmore. All right, let's do it, but I mean it. If this turns into a circus, I'll pull the plug myself. You have my word, Mr. Bennett. She offered her hand again. You won't regret this. They shook once more, and just like that, Noah's small, quiet world shifted again. The rest of the day was a blur. Captain Whitmore and her team, which seemed to materialize from thin air, began a quiet but thorough sweep of the property. Noah watched in amazement as men and women in plain clothes, but with military precision, measured sightlines, checked outbuildings, and discussed logistics over encrypted radios. Emily, meanwhile, had taken it upon herself to spruce up the place. She swept the front porch, organized the barn, even directed some of the volunteers to move equipment into neat rows. Her energy was contagious, and before long, the farm looked less like a desperate operation clinging to survival and more like a place of purpose and pride. By late afternoon, Elena Cruz arrived in her battered Ford pickup, bearing baskets of homemade tamales and jars of lemonade. "I heard a little birdie say something big's happening tomorrow," she teased as she set up a folding table near the barn. Noah chuckled. "You might say that." Elena handed him a tamale wrapped in foil. "No matter who shows up, remember why you did this. That's the only thing that matters." He nodded, unwrapping the food and taking a grateful bite. The spices burned his tongue, but it was a welcome kind of fire. As the sun sank low and painted the fields in gold and crimson, Noah leaned against the barn and watched the activity unfold around him. Tomorrow, someone important, maybe the most important person in the country, would stand on this dirt, breathe this air, and see what one act of kindness could ripple into. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was, strangely, exactly what his wife would have wanted. He looked skyward, the first stars winking into view, and whispered, "Hope you're watching, Anna." And in the quiet hush of the Missouri twilight, he swore he could almost hear her whisper back. The morning sun barely broke through the cloud cover as Noah swung open the heavy doors to the old equipment barn. Dust swirled in the golden light, motes drifting lazily in the air like tiny spirits of a bygone era. The smell inside was a mixture of old hay, rust, and memories. This barn had been part of the Bennett farm for generations, and today it would serve as more than just a shelter for aging tools and broken dreams. Noah had decided, reluctantly, to clear some space for the security preparations Captain Whitmore's team was setting up. If someone important was coming, they needed room for equipment, tents, and whatever other federal paraphernalia they planned to bring along. He and Emily had spent the morning stacking unused crates and moving outdated machinery to the far corners. Now, as Emily took a break to answer calls from more volunteers, Noah pressed deeper into the dim, forgotten parts of the barn. His boots crunched over the dirt floor as he pushed aside a battered wooden cabinet. That's when he saw it. A trunk, half buried under an old canvas tarp and a pile of dry, rotted saddle blankets. The trunk was military issue, green with rusted metal fittings, and the initials WB were stenciled in faded black paint across the top. "WB," Noah murmured, heart thudding strangely in his chest. William Bennett, his great-grandfather. Kneeling down, Noah brushed off decades of dust and debris. The padlock had long since corroded away, leaving the latch easy to open. With a creak of protesting hinges, the lid swung back to reveal a treasure trove of the past. Inside, carefully packed and surprisingly intact, were bundles of letters tied with fraying twine, a leather-bound journal, and a small, neatly folded American flag. Beneath those rested a silver lighter, a set of dog tags, and a photograph of a young man in uniform standing proudly beside an old John Deere tractor. A tractor not too different from the one Noah's grandfather had taught him to drive. Noah swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. He reached for the journal first, fingers trembling slightly. The leather was cracked, but supple, the ink faded, but legible. Turning the first few pages, he realized he wasn't just holding a relic. He was holding a window into the soul of a man he'd never met, but whose legacy ran through his veins. The entries were dated between 1943 and 1946, spanning William Bennett's deployment in Europe during World War II and his return home. And woven through the pages was a recurring theme, a mantra almost. This land must serve, just as we served. It must feed more than mouths. It must feed hope. Noah sat back on his heels, overwhelmed. It wasn't just a farm to William. It was a mission. The letters appeared to be correspondence between William and his wife, Eleanor, describing life both on the front lines and back home in Fairhaven. One letter caught Noah's eye, dated August 15th, 1945, the day after VJ Day. Dearest Eleanor, as the world celebrates the end of this terrible war, I find my mind wandering back to Fairhaven, to the rows of corn swaying in the Missouri breeze, to the orchard ripe with apples, to the rich, dark soil waiting for new life. I made a vow out there among the ruins of Europe. If I make it home, I won't just farm for profit. I will farm for purpose. Our land will be a place where community grows alongside crops, where no one hungry is ever turned away. It is a sacred trust, and I mean to honor it. Forever yours, William. Noah sat silently, the letter trembling slightly in his hands. Dad? Emily's voice called from outside. You okay in there? Yeah, he croaked, clearing his throat. Just found something. Later that afternoon, Noah knew he needed help to fully understand the historical weight of what he'd uncovered. There was only one person he trusted with something this important. Dr. Marcus Avery, a historian from the University of Kansas and a longtime friend of Noah's late wife. Marcus arrived in a battered Subaru, wearing his trademark tweed jacket despite the warm air. His graying hair was tousled, and he carried a leather satchel stuffed with notebooks and archival gloves. You said you had something for me? Marcus asked, his eyes lighting up the moment he spotted the trunk. Found it in the barn, Noah said simply. Belonged to my great-grandfather. Marcus slipped on his gloves with a reverence usually reserved for ancient artifacts and began carefully examining the contents. As he flipped through the journal and read some of the letters aloud, his voice grew thick with emotion. Noah, this isn't just family memorabilia. This is living history. It's rare to find such a personal, unfiltered account of a returning soldier's vision for post-war America. He made a promise, Noah said, staring at the journal, a promise to use the land for something bigger than himself. Marcus nodded, gently placing the journal back in the trunk. And maybe you're the one meant to fulfill it. Noah ran a hand over his face, grappling with the enormity of it all. Everything he'd done these past few weeks, the donation, the community harvest. It hadn't just been a desperate gesture. It had been an echo of a promise made decades before he was born. As night fell over Fairhaven, Noah stood alone by the barn, the journal clutched to his chest. The moon cast a soft, silver light across the fields, illuminating the rows of ripening crops that had somehow survived the worst summer he could remember. He thought of William coming home from war with dirt under his nails and a mission in his heart, of all the sacrifices made so he could stand here today. The land was more than soil and seed. It was memory. It was promise. It was purpose. Noah squared his shoulders, feeling a strange peace settle over him. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. Motorcades, security teams, politicians, maybe even cameras. But tonight, he made his own silent vow to the man whose blood ran in his veins. I'll carry it forward, he whispered into the night. I won't let you down. The stars overhead seemed to pulse in quiet affirmation, as if the very heavens acknowledged the renewal of an old sacred trust. And deep in the barn, the trunk sat closed once more, guarding its treasures, its secrets, and now, its fulfilled promise. The house was quieter than usual that night, wrapped in a tension so thick Noah Bennett could almost feel it pulsing in the air. He sat at the worn kitchen table, one hand wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, the other resting uselessly on the wood. The clock on the wall ticked with heavy deliberation, each passing second winding him tighter. Emily paced back and forth in front of the window, arms folded tightly across her chest. She had been uncharacteristically silent during dinner, pushing her food around her plate until Noah finally gave up pretending not to notice. Now, she broke the silence with a sharp breath. Dad, are we really sure about this? She asked, her voice trembling at the edges. I mean, what if this blows up in our faces? What if we just threw away everything for a nice gesture that changes nothing? Noah lifted his eyes to her, the weight of her words pressing heavily on his chest. He had asked himself the same thing 100 times since they made the decision. Giving away the harvest had felt right, deep in his bones, but was it wise? "Emily, it's not about what we get back," he said quietly. "It's about what we stand for, who we are." "That's easy to say when you're not about to lose the farm, Dad," she burst out, her cheeks flushing with emotion. "Your whole life is tied to this place. Mom's memory is tied to this place. And now, after everything we've fought through, the droughts, the debts, you're just giving it away?" Her voice cracked, and Noah flinched at the pain in it. She wasn't being ungrateful. She was scared in a way that only someone who's watched everything they love hang by a thread could be. He pushed back his chair and stood slowly, crossing the kitchen to where she stood stiffly near the window. Beyond the glass, the field stretched out under the moonlight, rows of half-harvested vegetables, swaying slightly in the cool night breeze. "I'm scared too, Em," he admitted. "I think about the bills piling up, about the college tuition, about losing this place your mother loved, every damn day." He took a steadying breath. "But doing the right thing isn't always safe. Sometimes it costs you. Sometimes it feels stupid as hell. But I have to believe that kindness, real kindness, is still worth something." Emily wiped her sleeve across her eyes, sniffling. "I just don't want you to regret it. I don't want you to lose everything because you were trying to be good." Noah smiled faintly, a sad, understanding smile. "If I lose the farm, but keep my soul intact, if I show you that standing for something matters more than standing alone with nothing but pride, then it's not losing." She hesitated, then launched herself into his arms, hugging him fiercely. He held her tightly, feeling the thinness of her shoulders, the fierce beat of her heart against his chest. Neither of them spoke again for a long while. Outside, the night deepened. And then, the rumble began. First one truck, then another, then another. Noah and Emily parted, startled, and stared out the window. Headlights bobbed along the old dirt road leading to the Bennett farm, cutting across the fields like beams from a lighthouse in a storm. "What the hell?" Noah muttered, grabbing his jacket and rushing out the front door, Emily close behind him. They reached the porch just as the first truck pulled into the driveway, kicking up dust under its tires. It was an old Ford, the paint faded and dented, but in the truck bed were tools, harvest equipment, bushels, even spare parts. The driver hopped out. It was Hank Morrison. Noah blinked in disbelief. Hank, the same neighbor who had laughed over beers at the bar about Noah's hippie foolishness, stood there now, hat in hand, looking sheepish. "Evening, Noah," Hank said gruffly. "Heard you might need a few extra hands." Behind Hank, more trucks rolled in, each one carrying people Noah recognized. Farmers who had once dismissed him as a dreamer, laborers he hadn't seen in months, old rivals who had once sneered at his stubborn insistence on doing things the old way. "What? Why?" Noah stammered, genuinely at a loss. Hank shrugged awkwardly. "Word got around, about what you did, about the shelter, about you giving away the whole damn crop when you could barely make your own ends meet." He glanced over his shoulder as more neighbors climbed down from their trucks, grabbing gloves and tools without being asked. "Figured. Maybe it's time we remembered we're neighbors first, competitors second." Noah swallowed hard against the lump rising in his throat. Emily clutched his arm, eyes wide with disbelief. The men and women started spreading out across the fields with the quiet efficiency of people used to working the land. Engines fired up, lights snapped on. Harsh, blinding beams cut through the darkness, illuminating the rows of crops still left to harvest. Noah stood frozen, watching as the harvest began anew under the stars, not by hired workers, not by a paid crew, but by the hands of his community, by people who had once stood apart, now coming together. It was the most beautiful, humbling sight he had ever witnessed. Emily squeezed his hand. "See, Dad, it's not just us." Noah could barely nod, too choked up to respond. And then, just when he thought the night couldn't possibly grow any stranger, more lights appeared on the horizon. But these weren't the work trucks of Fairhaven locals. These lights were sharper, brighter, blue and red. A convoy of SUVs and black sedans crested the hill at the edge of Noah's property. Even from a distance, Noah could feel the hum of authority in the way they moved, deliberate, coordinated, menacing in their precision. The motorcade. Dozens of vehicles moved silently into position around the farm, headlights cutting long, eerie beams through the mist rolling in from the river. The lead SUV stopped at the end of Noah's driveway. Agent Lucas Perry stepped out, flanked by two other agents in dark suits. Noah and Emily instinctively straightened as he approached, their skin prickling under the intensity of the attention now focused on them. Agent Perry gave a tight smile, nodding respectfully. "Mr. Bennett, Miss Bennett." He surveyed the bustling activity around the farm, the lights, the gathering volunteers, the trucks being loaded. "Looks like you've got quite an operation underway." Noah cleared his throat. Yeah, we're trying to finish up before morning." Perry's expression softened slightly. "You'll want to finish before morning," he said meaningfully. "Things are about to get a little busy around here." Noah's stomach twisted. "Busy how?" Perry hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. "There's been a change in plans. The visit's not in a few days anymore." He looked Noah dead in the eye. "The president is arriving tomorrow, first light." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt off its axis. Noah staggered back a step. Emily gasped. "You're kidding," she whispered. Perry shook his head once, firmly. No room for misunderstanding. "No, ma'am. Airlift is already inbound. Final sweep teams will arrive within the hour." He glanced at the assembled volunteers. "If you need to alert your people, now's the time." Noah's mind raced. Logistics, safety, parking, media, security. He didn't even have a clean shirt that wasn't stained with dirt or oil. The President of the United States was about to step foot on his battered, barely holding together farm. And there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it now. Noah looked up at the vast night sky, stars flickering coldly against the black velvet darkness. The storm wasn't coming tomorrow. The storm was already here, and all he could do was stand tall and weather it. The morning broke crisp and cool, the kind of golden October day that seemed to bless the earth before winter claimed it. Noah stood on the front porch, coffee steaming in his hand, his nerves rattling under the surface. It wasn't every day the President of the United States paid a visit to a small, struggling farm in Fairhaven, Missouri. Emily joined him, clutching a thermos to her chest, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "It's really happening, Dad," she said, barely above a whisper. Out on the main road, the first signs of the impending arrival were visible. State troopers lined the shoulders, their cruisers parked at strategic intervals, lights silently flashing. Temporary fencing had been erected overnight, sectioning off the Bennett property like a small fort. Secret Service agents buzzed around, coordinating last-minute security sweeps. American flags had been posted along the long dirt driveway leading up to the farmhouse, their colors vivid against the clear sky. Media trucks formed a perimeter at the designated press area. Satellite dishes pointed skyward, and cameramen adjusted their tripods, murmuring to each other about lighting angles and lens settings. Journalists in crisp suits and designer jackets rehearsed their opening lines, microphones in hand, while photographers tested their flashes. "This is insane," Noah muttered, setting down his coffee cup. His palms were sweating despite the cool air. Before he could say more, Agent Lucas Perry approached, his dark suit crisp, earpiece glinting in the sunlight. "Mr. Bennett," he said with a firm nod, "we're 5 minutes out. Please follow me to the greeting point." Noah's boots felt leaden as he walked across the yard, Emily at his side. They stopped near the flag-lined drive, a small area cordoned off by portable barriers. A makeshift podium and a few chairs were set up off to the side, but the focus was clear. This was to be a simple greeting, not a grand event. The president had insisted on that, they had said. A low rumble grew louder until it became a synchronized symphony of engines. Over the hill, the motorcade appeared, a line of black SUVs, a few police motorcycles, and at its heart, the gleaming armored limousine known as the Beast. The motorcade slowed, then stopped directly in front of the farmhouse. Secret Service agents poured from the vehicles, taking their positions with almost mechanical efficiency. The door to the Beast opened, and there he was, the president. Despite the surreal circumstances, Noah felt a strange grounding in the moment. The man walking toward him wasn't some distant political figure anymore. He was simply a human being, someone who had chosen to witness firsthand what a small act of kindness could create. The president smiled warmly as he approached, extending his hand. Noah accepted it, feeling the firm, steady grip. "Mr. Bennett," the president said, his voice carrying easily, "it's an honor to meet you." "The honor's mine, sir," Noah replied, his voice steadier than he expected. The president turned to Emily, offering her a handshake as well. "And you must be Emily," he said, his smile widening. "Your father's told me a lot about you." Emily beamed, her cheeks flushed. "Thank you, Mr. President." After the introductions, they moved toward the small podium. The president stepped up first, his presence commanding but not overwhelming. He looked out over the gathered crowd, townsfolk, veterans, volunteers, students, and the media that documented it all. "Today," he began, his voice resonant, "we gather not because of political ambition or policy debate, but because of a simple, extraordinary act." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the fields, the farmhouse, the crowd. When Noah Bennett faced hardship, he could have chosen silence. He could have chosen survival over sacrifice. Instead, he chose generosity. He chose to remind America of what it means to stand for one another. Noah felt Emily's hand slip into his, squeezing tight. He blinked against the sudden sting behind his eyes. The president continued, "In a time when we often feel divided, when we sometimes forget our shared values, one farmer's decision lit a fire of compassion that spread across this town, across this state, and now, across this nation." Applause broke out, genuine and rolling like a wave. "Noah and Emily," the president said, turning to them again, "you have reminded all of us that the strength of this country isn't just built in marble halls and corner offices. It's built here, in places like Fairhaven, where the soil runs deep and the hearts run deeper." He reached into the pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a small framed commendation. "On behalf of a grateful nation," he said, "I want to present you with the Presidential Medal for Community Service." Gasps rippled through the crowd as an aide stepped forward, handing the medals to the president. He first pinned Noah's, a gleaming medal with a blue and white ribbon, onto his work shirt. Then he presented Emily with her own, smiling as he did so. Noah didn't know what to say. For a man who had spent his life working fields and fixing machinery, standing under the national spotlight felt as unnatural as trying to farm with a teaspoon. But when he looked around, at the gathered veterans, at the volunteers who had picked alongside him in the hot sun, at his daughter whose dreams were growing alongside the crops, he knew it was right. He stepped up to the microphone, clearing his throat. The cameras turned their lenses toward him. "Thank you, Mr. President," he began, "but I didn't do this for recognition. I didn't do this for medals. I did it because it was the right thing to do." He paused, searching for the right words. This farm has seen a lot. Good years, bad years, losses, wins. But at the end of the day, it's not about the numbers in a ledger. It's about feeding people. It's about helping each other. It's about remembering that when we have more than we need, we build longer tables, not higher fences. The crowd grew quiet, hanging on every word. "I don't know what tomorrow holds for me or for this farm," Noah admitted. "But I know this. If we keep sowing seeds of kindness, if we keep caring for the land and each other, then the harvests we reap will always be enough." The applause was thunderous. The president stepped forward once more, placing a hand briefly on Noah's shoulder. "Thank you for reminding us all of that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The remainder of the visit unfolded like something out of a dream. The president toured the farm, shaking hands with the volunteers, chatting with local farmers, laughing with the veterans. Emily led him through the apple orchards, explaining the sustainable farming techniques Noah had stubbornly implemented even when they weren't fashionable. News cameras followed at a respectful distance, capturing the authentic moments that couldn't be scripted. A small boy handing the president a misshapen pumpkin, a veteran tearing up as he described finding a purpose again in the fields of Bennett Farm. By late afternoon, as the motorcade prepared to leave, the president took a final moment with Noah and Emily. "This isn't the end," he said. "This is just the beginning. We need more places like this, more people like you." And with that, he was gone, the motorcade disappearing down the dirt road, leaving in its wake a changed farm, a changed family, and maybe, just maybe, a changed nation. Noah stood there long after the dust had settled, Emily by his side, the weight of what had happened settling into his bones. "Dad," Emily said softly, "we did it." He nodded slowly, the autumn sun dipping low on the horizon. "No," he said, voice rough with emotion. "We're just getting started." The morning after the president's visit, the fields of Fairhaven felt somehow different. It wasn't just the way the sunlight hit the rows of freshly harvested crops, or the lingering hum of excitement that clung to the air like dew. It was deeper than that. It was as if the land itself had absorbed the magnitude of what had just happened, and now it vibrated with a new kind of energy. Hope, maybe, or possibility. Noah stood on his front porch, a steaming cup of black coffee warming his hands, staring out over his fields. For the first time in years, the worry lines around his eyes seemed less deep, his posture less weighed down. Emily sat on the steps below him, scrolling through endless articles and video clips on her phone. "Dad," she said, glancing up with a grin, "you're officially viral." He chuckled low in his throat. "Don't even know what that means, Em. Sounds like something I should see a doctor about." She laughed, that sweet musical sound that reminded him so much of her mother. "It means everybody's talking about you. You, the farm, the donation, everything. It's blowing up all over the internet. News stations, military forums, even agribusiness blogs. People are calling you the farmer who fed the forgotten." Noah shook his head in disbelief. "All we did was pick some crops and give them to folks who needed it." "Exactly," Emily said, her eyes shining, "and that's what makes it so powerful." Before he could respond, a sleek black sedan pulled into the drive, raising a small cloud of dust. Noah felt his gut tighten instinctively. After the last few days, strange cars meant important people, and important people usually meant complicated conversations. The car door opened, and Captain Sarah Whitmore stepped out, this time in civilian clothes. Dark jeans, boots, a button-down shirt, and the same no-nonsense aura she always carried. She gave a small wave and approached the porch. "Mornin', Bennett family," she called with a smile that looked more genuine than any Noah had seen from her yet. "Captain?" Noah nodded, setting his coffee on the railing. "Or should I just call you Sarah now?" She chuckled. "Sarah's fine today." She climbed the steps and stood beside him, looking out over the fields the way farmers do, like she could read the health of the soil and the promise of the next season just by the color of the leaves. "I won't take up much of your time," she began. "But after yesterday, well, let's just say a lot of wheels started turning back in D.C. Noah raised an eyebrow. "Wheels?" Sarah nodded. "There's a proposal on the table. The Department of Agriculture, in collaboration with the Department of Veterans Affairs, wants to fund a pilot program. They're calling it Operation Homegrown, and they want to base it right here, on your land." Noah blinked, completely blindsided. "They want to what?" "They want to create a training program," Sarah continued, her voice steady but excited, "teaching sustainable farming techniques to veterans transitioning back to civilian life, giving them skills, purpose, and a community. Your donation, your farm, your story, it inspired it." Emily jumped to her feet. "Are you serious?" "As a heart attack," Sarah said with a grin. "And they want you, Noah. They want you to help run it." Noah rubbed a hand over his face, trying to process the flood of emotions. Gratitude, fear, pride, panic. "I'm no teacher," he said finally, his voice rough. "You're more than that," Sarah replied gently. "You're living proof that farming's about more than making money. It's about feeding bodies and spirits, and that's exactly the lesson these veterans need." He glanced down at Emily, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Her face said everything. "Dad, we have to do this." Before Noah could even wrap his head around it, another truck pulled up, this one older, beat up, with a familiar creak to the door as it opened. Hank Morrison climbed out, wearing a clean flannel shirt and a sheepish expression. Noah's spine stiffened automatically. Old habits die hard. Hank approached, hat in hand, literally. He cleared his throat as he reached the porch. Noah, he said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. Could I have a word? Noah exchanged a glance with Sarah, who offered a subtle nod before stepping aside to give them privacy. Go ahead, Noah said, arms crossed. Hank looked down at the dirt, scuffing his boot before meeting Noah's eyes. I owe you an apology. For years, I looked down on you. Thought you were foolish for not modernizing the way the big operations were. Thought you were stuck in the past. Noah said nothing, letting him stew a little. But yesterday, Hank swallowed hard. I watched you change this whole damn town, without a dime in your pocket. You reminded folks why we farm in the first place, and I realized I've been farming for numbers, not people. Noah softened, just a little. What are you getting at, Hank? He asked. I want in, Hank said simply. If you'll have me, I want to be part of this program. Teach what I know, learn what I don't. The words hung in the air like a fragile truce. Noah studied him. For the first time, Hank Morrison didn't look like a rival. He looked like a man trying to find his way home. All right, Noah said finally, offering his hand. But you're going to have to put the people first, not the yield. Hank's face broke into a rare smile. Deal. They shook on it, the kind of handshake that mattered. By the end of the day, word had spread faster than dry leaves in a prairie wind. Fairhaven, a town that had been splintering under the pressures of modern agriculture and economic survival, began to knit itself back together. Farmers who hadn't spoken in years showed up at Noah's place offering seed, equipment, labor. The town council called an emergency meeting, not to shut anything down, but to figure out how to support the program. Churches organized meal trains, high schoolers volunteered for field work, retired veterans offered to mentor. It was like someone had lit a fire in the heart of Fairhaven, and for the first time in a long while, people remembered what it felt like to be neighbors instead of competitors. As Noah stood under the wide Missouri sky that evening, watching headlights snake down the road as more folks arrived to help, he felt something deeper than hope stirring in his chest. It was legacy. It was healing. It was a beginning. He turned to Emily, who stood beside him with tears brimming in her eyes. You started all this, Dad, she whispered. He shook his head slowly. We did, Em. And now it's bigger than both of us. They stood there a while longer, letting the cool breeze wash over them, the stars coming out one by one above a town that was waking up to itself again. Fairhaven was no longer just surviving, it was growing. And so were they. The first anniversary of the Fairhaven Veterans Agricultural Training Center arrived on a crisp, sunlit morning that seemed to carry the scent of possibility on every breeze. 1 year, 12 months that had reshaped not just a struggling farm, but an entire community. Noah Bennett stood on the rise overlooking the fields, coffee mug in hand, watching the morning unfold. Below him, rows of newly constructed greenhouses shimmered in the early light, and wide expanses of farmland stretched out like an open promise. Men and women, some with the unmistakable bearing of military veterans, others fresh-faced community volunteers, moved across the property with purpose, their laughter and shouted greetings filling the air. He still marveled at it sometimes, how everything had changed since that wild, desperate decision to give away the harvest, how a single act of faith had grown into something so much larger than himself. Morning, Dad, a familiar voice called. Noah turned to see Emily approaching, clipboard in hand, her dark hair tucked under a battered Fairhaven Vets Ag Center ball cap. She wore a crisp button-up shirt with the center's logo stitched over the pocket and the confident stride of someone who had found her place in the world. You ready for the ceremony? She asked, a teasing smile tugging at her mouth. As ready as I'll ever be, Noah replied, chuckling. Seems like just yesterday you were arguing with me about whether this was a crazy idea. Emily laughed, the sound bright and easy. I never said it was crazy. I said it was risky. Big difference. Noah shook his head with fond exasperation. Same thing when you're betting the farm. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out over the busy scene below. Today was more than just a celebration. It marked the first graduation of veteran trainees, men and women who had spent the past year learning the skills of sustainable agriculture, healing old wounds through new growth. You know, Emily said softly. There were days this past year I wasn't sure we'd make it. Days I thought we were in over our heads. Noah nodded. There were days like that for me too. But then I'd see them, she continued, glancing toward a group of veterans gathered near the orchard, digging, planting, laughing, and I remembered why we started. Noah smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. You're a good teacher, Em. She rolled her eyes playfully. I'm the academic director, Dad. Sounds fancier. And I'm just the technical advisor, he said, tipping an imaginary hat. Glad to take orders from you. Emily laughed again and bumped her shoulder against his. Come on, they're waiting. Together, they made their way toward the main pavilion where chairs had been set up in neat rows beneath strings of white lights. At the front of the gathering, a simple wooden stage bore a banner reading, Fairhaven Veterans Agricultural Training Center, First Graduating Class. The graduates sat proudly in the front rows, their faces a tapestry of experiences, young and old, men and women, all bonded by the shared journey that had brought them here. Each wore a simple sash, embroidered with a wheat stalk and an American flag, the center's humble but meaningful symbol. The crowd settled as Elena Cruz, still tireless in her community leadership, stepped up to the microphone to welcome everyone. 1 year ago, Elena began, her voice strong and steady. We stood here with hope in our hearts but no guarantees. Today, we see the fruits of that hope, fields full of crops, greenhouses teeming with life, and most importantly, lives rebuilt and futures reclaimed. She turned to the graduates with a smile. Today, you are not just veterans, you are farmers, stewards of the land, and builders of a new legacy. Applause rippled through the crowd. Noah spotted Hank Morrison standing near the back, arms crossed, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his weathered mouth. Hank had become one of the center's biggest supporters, donating equipment and even a parcel of land for experimental farming. After Elena, Emily stepped up to the podium. Noah watched her with a swelling pride he could barely contain. She spoke with clarity and passion, her words weaving the story of the past year, the hard-won victories, the setbacks overcome, the transformation not just of land, but of lives. I could tell you all about the improvements in soil health, the increase in yield, the grants we've secured, she said. But the real story of this place lives in the hands that have planted seeds, pulled weeds, harvested food, and in the hearts that have found healing here. Her voice caught slightly, but she pressed on. This land was saved because my father believed in something bigger than himself. And today, so many of you have taken that belief and made it your own. Noah swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. When she finished, the graduates were called up one by one to receive their certificates. Each handshake, each hug, was a victory. Some wore dress uniforms, others simple work shirts, but every one of them carried a new lightness, a new purpose. As the ceremony wound down, the graduates and guests moved toward the community garden for a harvest lunch prepared entirely from the center's fields. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted vegetables, fresh salads, golden cornbread, and hearty stews. Noah found himself at a table with several graduates, their conversation easy and full of plans, starting small farms, working with local food banks, mentoring future trainees. Seeds of change, planted here, beginning to take root far beyond Fairhaven. Later, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields in hues of amber and rose, Noah wandered toward the old apple orchard, where it had all started. The trees were heavy with fruit, the branches bowed with promise. Emily found him there, hands in her pockets, gazing at the rows. Thinking about Mom? She asked quietly. Always, he said. But today, I think she'd be proud. I know she would, Emily said firmly. She's part of everything here. They stood together as twilight settled, the soft hum of voices and laughter drifting from the pavilion behind them. So, Emily said after a moment, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. Ready to plan for year 2? Noah chuckled. You're the boss now, remember? Good, she grinned, because I have big ideas. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that felt like a harvest in itself. I wouldn't expect anything less. As they walked back toward the light and life of the center, Noah felt a peace he hadn't known in years. The farm wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving, growing something richer than any crop he'd ever planted. Hope, purpose, a future built from seeds sown in the darkest season of his life. And it was only just beginning. The crisp October air carried the scent of ripe apples and fresh earth across Fairhaven, Missouri. A golden sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over Noah Bennett's orchard, where rows of apple trees stood heavy with fruit, their branches drooping under the weight of abundance. The scene was almost dreamlike, the perfect backdrop for a day Noah had once thought impossible. 1 year had passed since the day he'd made that reckless, beautiful decision to give away his harvest to the veterans' shelter. 1 year since the world had come knocking on the weathered doors of Bennett Farm. And now the President of the United States was back, but not with a motorcade full of press, cameras, and security barriers. Today he came quietly. No cameras, no speeches, just a friend coming to celebrate. The farm buzzed with quiet energy. Tables draped in checkered cloths stretched across the open field. Veterans and their families, neighbors, students, and volunteers milled about, laughing and sharing stories. At the center of it all stood the heart of the place, Noah Bennett, dressed in his Sunday best, a crisp, button-down shirt tucked into worn jeans, his silver hair catching the light, his hands rough and strong as ever. Emily, now 20, moved through the crowd with effortless grace. As director of academic programs at the Fairhaven Veteran Agricultural Center, she had blossomed into a true leader, her mother's warmth and her father's resilience woven into her every step. She paused to help a small boy hoist a too large pumpkin into a wagon, her laughter ringing clear across the orchard. Noah watched her for a long moment, his chest swelling with pride. Everything he had fought for, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, it was all worth it. A gentle hand touched his shoulder. "You made something special here, Noah," said a familiar voice. Noah turned to see the president standing beside him, dressed not in a suit, but in khakis and a casual button-down, blending in like any other visitor. His smile was genuine, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Mr. President," Noah said, offering his hand. "Today," the president said, gripping Noah's hand firmly, "let's just stick with John." Noah chuckled. "John it is." They strolled slowly between the trees, the orchard alive with the sounds of harvest, the thump of apples dropping into crates, the hum of conversations, the occasional peal of laughter. Everywhere Noah looked, he saw life blooming, not just in the crops, but in the people who had found a second chance here. "It's humbling," Noah admitted. "I never imagined any of this when we started. I just wanted to help, to do something that felt right." The president nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes that's all it takes, one seed planted at the right time, in the right soil." They walked in companionable silence for a while, passing the rows of golden corn, the thriving vegetable gardens, and the neat cabins built to house the veterans in training. Flags flapped gently in the breeze, but there was none of the stiff formality of last year's visit. This was real, lived in, worn like a favorite jacket. Eventually, their steps led them to a quiet corner of the orchard, where a single modest bench sat beneath the shade of an old apple tree. Tucked behind the bench was a small, weathered photograph, set carefully in a frame and protected under glass. Maria Bennett's face smiled out at them, frozen forever in a moment of sunlit joy. Noah felt his throat tighten. He knelt down, brushing a few fallen leaves away from the frame with the tenderness of a man tending to sacred ground. "We found our way back, Maria," he whispered. "Right here, on this land, just like you always believed we would." The president stood quietly a few steps away, giving Noah his moment. When Noah rose again, he turned to find not just John, but a small group gathered nearby. Emily, Hank Morrison, Elena Cruz, Dr. Marcus Avery, and a handful of the veterans who had become like extended family. Hank, the once proud competitor, gave a gruff nod. "You were right, Bennett. Sometimes it's not about being the biggest farm, it's about being the farm that makes the biggest difference." Noah smiled. "Took you long enough to figure that out, Morrison." Laughter rippled through the group. As the sun dipped lower, casting the world in a wash of orange and gold, a hush fell over the gathering. Elena Cruz stepped forward, holding a small basket filled with seeds, corn, wheat, beans, tomatoes, all the staples of the American farm. Fairhaven was built on farming, she said, her voice carrying across the field. But it thrives because of the people who remember why we farm. Not just for profit, not just for survival, but for each other. She turned to Noah and Emily. These seeds are a reminder. Every act of kindness we plant will bear fruit in its own time. Noah accepted the basket with trembling hands. The president stepped forward one last time. America needs reminders like this, he said, voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Fairhaven. No speeches, no cameras, just honest gratitude. As night fell and lanterns were lit, the community sat down to share a harvest feast. Long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, pies, and casseroles, all made with ingredients grown right there on the land that had once seemed destined for foreclosure. Noah sat at the center, Emily at his side, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and strangers who had become family. He looked around at the faces bathed in firelight, the laughter that floated up into the crisp night air, and felt a contentment deeper than any he'd ever known. The harvest moon rose high overhead, and somewhere deep in the orchard, an old barn owl hooted into the night. Fairhaven had changed, but more importantly, it had endured. The seeds Noah had planted, with his courage, his faith, and his refusal to give in to despair, had taken root, and now they spread, not just across the fields of Missouri, but across the hearts of a nation hungry for hope. In a world that often felt divided and weary, Fairhaven stood as a quiet, steadfast reminder. Kindness mattered. Community mattered. One farmer, one field, one heart at a time. Change was not only possible, it was inevitable. As the night deepened and the stars thickened overhead, Noah leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting once more toward the orchard, toward Maria's tree, where the photograph smiled quietly in the moonlight. "We did good, Maria," he murmured. And across the land, unseen but deeply felt, the harvest of kindness continued to grow, season after season, one life at a time. If Noah Bennett's journey taught us anything, it's that sometimes the smallest seeds, an act of kindness, a leap of faith, grow into the biggest, most unexpected miracles. In a world that too often feels fractured, his story reminds us that change doesn't always come from grand speeches or sweeping gestures. Sometimes it starts quietly, humbly, with a farmer, a field, and a choice to do what's right, even when no one's looking. And maybe that's the part that stays with you long after the dust settles over Fairhaven. The realization that every one of us, in our own way, carries the power to be a steward of something bigger than ourselves. A community, a legacy, a hope that refuses to be extinguished. Now, I'd love to hear what you think. What part of Noah and Emily's journey resonated with you the most? Have you ever seen a small act of kindness ripple outward and change more than you ever expected? Or maybe you're someone who's still planting your own seeds of hope, waiting to see what blooms. Drop your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one of them, and I can't wait to hear your stories. And if you felt even a spark of inspiration from Noah's story, it would mean the world if you'd hit that subscribe button and join our little corner of storytellers here. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. We've got more real, powerful, heart-hitting stories coming. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories about farms, families, forgotten promises, second chances, and the relentless spirit that ties us all together across the miles and the years. So stick around, pull up a chair. The next harvest of stories is just around the corner. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that even one voice, one act, and one story can still make a difference. I'll see you in the next chapter.